guys, thank you so much for being here. We know how valuable your time is. There's a lot of things pulling at each one of us and for our time, and there's so many good, important things that are out there. So we really appreciate your time here tonight to learn and discuss a really important topic, as you know. So thank you for being here. We're really excited to have the presenters that we do tonight and appreciative of their time and effort tonight as well. Just want to acknowledge a couple of people, I guess, or entities that have helped us put this together. We really appreciate our nursing staff from Minidoka School District. They're awesome. They jumped on this right when they participated in this presentation and came to our admin team and said, "Hey, we need to consider this for our area," and got right on it. So really appreciate their effort, as well as the South Central Public Health District, who's here tonight, and appreciate them helping to sponsor the event as well. We want to thank Minico High School. Thanks for you guys staying late. We appreciate the venue, the audio and visual, all the things that you set up tonight. We are recording tonight, and we'll be able to post this presentation on YouTube through our school district. So we are grateful for that as well. So thank you to all of you that have helped put this together. We do have tables in the lobby as you saw as you came in. We appreciate Mini Kajapaz being here, Minidoka Memorial Hospital, everybody that's kind of pitched in to just be here for this. This is a cool event for our community, so thank you again. I just want to read real quick about our presenters tonight. We're fortunate to have people who are knowledgeable and educated and have practical experience. They have real jobs outside of this, so they do this for the good of the public, which I respect and appreciate that effort. So really grateful for them being here tonight. We have with us tonight Dr. Johnny Condi, who's a pediatric neurologist who helps families and educators understand how brain development, sleep, stress, and digital media affect adolescent learning, behavior, and mental health. We have Agent Hart here, who's the Chief Deputy of the Canyon County Sheriff's Office and a former FBI Special Agent who focuses on prevention, substance use trends, and protecting youth through education. Officer Gomez is a school resource officer who travels across the United States sharing real-world insight on youth safety, peer pressure, online risks, and the power of strong relationships. And Nurse Kelly Rich is a doctor of nursing practice, family nurse practitioner, and founder of Save My Family, dedicated to helping families understand adolescent mental health and build resilience through education. So will you please help me in welcoming our awesome presenters and our team tonight as they take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for loving your kids enough to come and find out what they're going through a little bit deeper than you already know. Like you said, my name is Nurse Kelly. I got that name because I started substitute nursing and substitute teaching during COVID because I was going to do anything to keep my kids in school. And I found some things when I was there that got me thinking. And it was mainly when I was in the elementary schools, the kids came in for things like scraped knees and, an ice pack. But then when I got to the older grades and the high school, I was going up to rooms and clearing them out because people were having panic attacks. And I was like, what's going on with these older kids? Is this normal? And I just kind of kept it there. And then this middle picture is me with our youth group at church. And I kind of saw the same thing. It was right after COVID, so same time frame. The younger kids came in happy. They were all friends with each other. And then once they got older, they had no friends, is what they said, all of them. And then they had struggled with anxiety and depression. And one of the moms said to me, my daughter's being bullied. And I was like, oh, is she being bullied at school? And this girl's a popular kid. I know at school she's popular. And I said, is she getting bullied at school or online? And mom's like, well, is there a difference? So that was another little thing that I had to think about. Is there a difference? And then this final thing that was the catalyst for this event, is that's me with my baby sister. She's 20 years younger than me. And when she was 19 years old, just a little bit after those other two things, she attempted suicide. And it was really difficult for our family. I couldn't understand like what was going on for her. And we have the same parents, the same grandparents, same town, tiny town, and in Utah, and there was not a lot different except the generation gap, right? So then I really started studying what is going on with these kids. And here's what I found, and it's going to be a lot of our claim today. Okay, this first graph, well, let me read this first. A 10-year study discovered that teenage girls at age 13 who spend 2 to 3 hours daily on social media were at a higher risk for suicide as young adults. Well, that is my sister, right? She was born in the year 2000, so right here is where the iPhone was introduced in 2007. And then Instagram in 2010, Snapchat 2011. So right when she's going into middle school. She and all of her cohort were given phones with social media on them, and they had like no limits, right? Nobody knew what happens with the phones. Nobody knew the dangers. Nobody knew brain development because it was the first thing. So this little group of kids started to have skyrocketing mental health issues. As we can see, they all go up. So self-harm, suicide, major depression, in girls and all teens. So boys too, a little less with the social media, but we'll talk about video gaming for them. So what this also led to was the total minutes per day on entertainment screen compared with time with friends. So if you look here, in 2015, the time with friends started at 105 minutes, and then by 2021 was down to 45 minutes. And then the time on entertainment screens, right here, was at 400 minutes, and then went all the way up to 519. So that's 8.65 hours, 5.5 of which are spent on social media, okay? So does that prove anything? Not really, but we're here to explain a little bit how this might be contributing, and Dr. Connie will definitely say it is, to the problem with our youth today. And, okay, so around that time, after I searched this up, I was like, okay, what can we do? I can go back to school to become a nurse practitioner so that I can treat these kids that have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems. So I wanted to do that, and I got in. I went to ISU, but I was also like, hey, there is a 3 to 9 month wait for a mental health professional now, so what can we do now? And that's when I thought, why don't we just teach parents and educators and put together an event? So I remembered that during nursing school, I went to an event sort of like this. I saw this guy named Officer Gomez, and I was pretty impressed. So I went home that night and I started following him on Facebook. Does anybody here follow him? Yeah, good. Everybody else, you want to follow him too after this. But so I started following him, and this was a few years later. I was like, okay. He posted something, I shared it because it was brilliant. And I told my husband right after that, I'm gonna work with Officer Gomez one day. But I was thinking probably when I'm done with nurse practitioner school. And I'm not kidding, that night, Officer Gomez had messaged me and said, hey, I see that you're a local and you're in the medical field, and I was wondering if you'd kind of like to collaborate. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. So let's do this now. So I went up to Idaho City where he was working, and I shadowed him for the day and asked him if he would be interested in doing an event, and he said yes. That was 2022, I think, a while ago now. And so I was like, who else could we get? And I was thinking about, well, I listened to this podcast, and the podcaster passed away, so I saved a few of his last ones. And by the time I got to the very last one, that summer of 2022, it was the answer to what I was thinking about. It was your kid's brain on video games. And this podcaster wasn't from Idaho, but his guest happened to be from Idaho, living in Eagle, which is down the street from me, and working at St. Luke's in Boise. And I was like, okay, we need this pediatric neurologist to come and teach our parents and our educators about what's happening in the brain. So I kind of stalked him online, called his office. I left my messages with them, and they got back to me that he was interested. And we've been doing this for a few years now since. So he will be speaking to us. And then finally, I have known this person the longest, Agent Hart, former FBI Agent Hart. He doesn't say a lot, but when he does, you listen. And when I first heard him speak, it was at a church event, and it was about our youth safety. And I was like, he's perfect for this. So he also agreed to speak, and that's how we got our little group of speakers. It's well-rounded, and I hope that you guys will learn a lot today. And we're going to remind you that this is to educate and empower you and to prevent mental health issues in your kids. And we will start today with Agent Hart.
All right, well, what a great crowd. Thank you very much for coming tonight. As Nurse Kelly said, we're trying to, each of us has a different part of this. And my part, from just a little bit about me, I spent 27 years with the FBI, almost all of that time investigating what we call persons crimes, violent crime, crimes against children, gangs, drugs, those kinds of things. And then 3 years ago, I finished up my time in the FBI and am now the Chief Deputy for the Canyon County Sheriff's Office. So I've got 3 decades of experience in the types of things that I want to talk to you about tonight, and really want to be of service to you. So before I jump into my comments, I really kind of like to take a minute, this is the audience participation part, and ask you how I can best be of service to you tonight. What are the things that you're most concerned about, so that I can make sure that we touch on those in the few minutes that I have to talk to you. So who's going to be first? As a parent, what are the things that worry you most? Yes? Okay. For those who didn't hear her, she said one of her concerns is being the only parents who's trying to limit her kids' time on these devices. And I can assure you, you won't be the only parent after you listen to the material that Dr. Connie's going to talk about in brain development, and that Officer Gomez will talk about in the apps that your children use. It's evidence-based and undeniable, and so I think it will prompt other parents to want to take action. What else? What other fears do we have? Yes?
I don't know what I don't know.
Okay, now that's a great one. I think as parents, I have a high schooler still at home. We like to think that we're in touch and in tune with what's going on in our kids' lives, but the fact of the matter is we're kind of left in the dark a lot of times. So we'll try to address what we don't know. What else? Boy, this isn't a very fearful group. Yes?
I think I know a lot of dangers, but how do we get kids into understanding?
Okay. How do we scare the kids into understanding? I'll rephrase that, okay? Because one of the things you'll see on the slide is where I don't want us to act based on fear. I want us to act based on evidence and based on knowledge, and that if we have the knowledge of where the dangers are, then we can align our actions to prevent. I'm very big on prevention, right? That key question, would you rather respond to a tragedy, however good that response may be, or would you rather prevent one from happening in the first place? The answer is obvious. We'd rather prevent one. And there are some pitfalls out there, and I see a lot of kids in the audience tonight, and we'll keep this age appropriate, but there are a lot of pitfalls out there that your children simply aren't aware of, and you as parents may also not be aware of. And so that's the purpose tonight, is to talk about some of those things and to tell you as parents where those dangers exist so that you can help your kids avoid something that really is preventable and tragic in their lives. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we're seeing a lot of tragic incidents take place with our kids in the world that we live in. Anybody else? Yes?
I think for me, it's how to teach them to use it
Oh, good one.
in a responsible way, because it is a technology-driven world.
Yes.
And like our problem at home is that my husband and I work from home, and we use phones and technology for everything we do. And our kids are like, "Oh, you can be on your phone," you know, but okay, you know, it's
Yeah.
like a struggle. But it's like one thing we will have to navigate this.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me, like when and how and what does that path look like?
Yep, and we're absolutely, during the course of the evening, especially when Dr. Condi talks to you, there are some guidelines that I think are good guidelines that have been published based on vetted research that helps to navigate, how much is enough, how much is too much, and so those things I think are very, very helpful. So we'll have time for question and answers, but while I'm talking, if you have a question, please raise your hand. So I'm not here to talk too much about the tech stuff. This is kind of my pre-presentation slide, and that is, this is sort of the parameters of what I'd like to talk about tonight. So first, I want to clarify perception versus reality. As a parent, I think we have fears that are based on perceptions that are not based in reality. Okay? One of the ones that I use is, how many of you worry about stranger abduction of your kids? I'm terrified of it. I've worked a number of cases, of kidnapping cases, and as a parent, that's my greatest fear. Truly is my greatest fear. That's my perception, right? And the perception is that this is happening all the time. I can tell you right now, stranger abduction of children is very, very rare, and when it does happen, the FBI has what's called the Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. You get hundreds, literally hundreds of people working those cases. So, as a parent, our perception would be that, hey, I don't want to let my kids. In fact, there's research right around the advent of the internet and national news media. We stopped letting our kids play outside. Maybe around here that's not as bad, but because we had this perception that something terrible is going to happen. But we wouldn't hesitate to let them go have a sleepover next door where they get abused, which is 1,000 times more common. And so when I talk tonight, what I'm hoping is that we can dispel some of the perceptions that are inaccurate and talk about things that are real and accurate. We've already talked about we're not here to promote fear, we just want to provide knowledge. The other thing that's important to me for you as an audience tonight is that you leave with a clear understanding of your child's vulnerabilities, where they might fall into a problem, and then their capabilities. And what I see as I have responded and investigated, I can't count the number of these kind of cases that I've been involved in, is that parents, unfortunately, overestimate their child's capabilities. They think that their child would extricate themselves and my child would never fall prey to something like that. And then they underestimate how vulnerable their children are. So I'd like to try to strike that balance. And then, we're not here to tell you how to parent. But if we can present you with some evidence and you can align your parenting with the evidence as you see appropriate, then that's a win. And then I'll talk about preteens and teenagers just as kind of two groups. So, first off, I hope you'll agree that today our children, and sometimes us, live in two worlds. We have a physical world and a virtual world. And you'd be surprised that your kids may have a life in each of those worlds with different friends and activities that they engage in each of those worlds. In the physical world, what we need to be aware of, and what I'll talk to about a little bit tonight, are what we call hands-on predators. People who want to take advantage of and abuse your children. And they look for opportunities to exploit those kids. In order to do that, they need direct access to offend. That's the physical world. In the virtual world, what we call them are hands-off or non-contact sexual offenders. Doesn't mean they're any less harmful. In fact, in some cases, they're more harmful, and we'll talk about some of the tragedies we've seen with non-contact offenders. They use technology that's enabled by the platforms your kids are on. Officer Gomez is going to talk in detail about that and educate you on some of these apps. Virtual access is needed to offend. The key word in both of those slides is access. They need access to your kids. So, where do you find these people? How do they operate? And what can you do to protect your children? Those are the questions that I'd like to answer in the next few minutes. I want to start by showing you some very recent data. And this is data from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We call it NCMEC. So this is tracking for just 3.5 years, really, of online enticement. So you can see the number. This is national. This isn't state. This is for the whole nation. So 2022, we have 80,000. 2023, 186,000. Then we jump to 546,000. And that last bar is just the first half of 2025. So if we stay on track, we'll be at well over 1 million instances. Now, has online exploitation increased that much in those few years? No. There's a little bit of good news here. The government has mandated certain tracking and reporting requirements that have gone into effect. And that accounts partially for, I don't believe there's been an 1,100% increase in 2 years. So please don't misread the slide. But I do want you to know that online exploitation is a massive, massive problem that's being facilitated by a lot of these platforms, and this is just some data to show that. Secondly, financial sextortion. We'll talk about what this is, but similarly, you can see 10,000, 26,000, 30,000, and the first half of 2025 we're at 24,000. So there is a real increase in exploitative activity, but there's also, in order to try to combat this, an increase in reporting requirements and detection tools. All right, let's talk about preteen kids and how we can protect them. Who here has preteens? Okay, this is going to be useful to you, I hope. And please, if you have questions. But in my experience, as I've investigated cases and looked at how did this happen, right? That's one of the main questions I ask is how did an offender have the opportunity to offend? And out of that, if you as parents or grandparents will ask yourself 2 questions when you're going to let your child go out of your presence with somebody else, I think you would go a long way in avoiding some of the tragedies that take place with these types of offenders, these types of predators. So the first question is, to whom do we give control of our children? Would you agree that when you send them off to soccer or camp or your church groups or whatever, that you're giving control of your kids to somebody else? So you need to ask, who am I giving control of my kids to? And the second question is, who has access to our kids and under what circumstances? And there's tons of examples of this. I just recently read an article where a family went on a cruise. And the parents wanted some time alone, and so they put their kids in the daycare on the cruise ship. And what do you think happened? Now, I'm not saying that happens on all cruise ships, but the point is, the parents gave control of their children to someone that they knew nothing about, under circumstances where somebody had access to their child. Does it surprise you when you hear that a coach or a pastor or a teacher or a counselor has abused children? No? Yes? It shocks you? Okay. Why does it shock you? They're supposed to be trustworthy, and I think most of them are. And I think most of them are, and most of them are in it for the right reasons. Okay? Here's a question I always ask. How many of you like to fish? Okay, where do you go fishing? The river? I got multiple hands here. Where? The river? The Snake River? Okay, that's getting more specific. Still the wrong answer. Yeah? Oakley Reservoir? I'm sure it's great, but no, that's the wrong answer. You go where the fish are. Thank you. Okay. So for me, I'm not surprised when I hear it's a coach or a pastor or a counselor, because these people know their proclivities, they know what they like, and they will purposefully put themselves in a position to get access to the largest pool of potential victims. Now, does that mean you have to be suspicious of everybody? No. And remember, we're not promoting fear. I'm just telling you that you got to ask these questions and determine whether or not you're giving control to your children, to people who are trustworthy, and that you understand the circumstances that they'll be in with your kids. My kids played high school sports. They traveled with their teams. I knew the coaches. I knew the circumstances. I knew who they'd be rooming with, and so I was great with that. I'm not saying that you should lock your kids up and never let them go out and live in the world. But for your preteens particularly, this is important. I will tell you, having interviewed these types of offenders many times, you have a picture of them, and I think our picture is often wrong. These are people who are masters of manipulation. They will know if your kid they will compliment. They know if kids are needing something. They're very astute as to how to, they call it grooming. And so they engage in this process of getting these kids to the point where they can get them where they can offend. Okay? And there's a lot of steps along the way and time that's taken. The main thing is they have to get your kids alone. And so more than anything else, I think for preteens, you should be extremely cautious of any situation where your children are alone with another adult. You need to know who that adult is and what the circumstances are, okay? And how do we help them to navigate this without scaring them? I think you have to engage in age-appropriate conversations. We've got some resources that help. Nurse Kelly will talk about that. There's all kinds of conversation starters and resources to help you as parents have these kind of awkward conversations with your kids. Okay? Any questions about the preteens? Let's move on to teenagers. How many of you have teenagers? Okay, boy. This is a whole other deal, okay? With teenagers, the opportunities and the variety of situations is expanded. And so with teenagers, we get into solicitation online and much more movement from the virtual world into the physical world. We had a case very recently in Canyon County where we arrested an individual who flew all the way from Chicago to Canyon County to pick up a 12-year-old. And I wish I could say that was really uncommon, but it's not. And so that was a relationship that developed online to the point that they made arrangements for him to fly across the country and pick this girl up and leave with her. Fortunately, we were able to intervene and prevent that from happening. But that type of solicitation is what takes place on these apps and these platforms that we'll explain to you. So with our teenagers, we get a little bit of a crossover from the virtual world into the physical world. Who knows what sextortion is? What is it?
Where someone has shared a sexual image with somebody and they can use that to get money or to expose it.
Yeah. Yep. How many of you have teenage boys? Okay, if you have a teenage boy in today's world, this is an awkward conversation that you absolutely have to have. So sextortion is almost exclusively, or the vast majority is young teenage boys. They'll meet somebody online who they think is the love of their life. They start exchanging photos, then those photos become explicit. As soon as the young man sends an explicit photo, then guess what? The predator says, hey, if you don't pay me via gift card or it's usually a lower amount of money because they know it's a teenage boy, but this is multi-billion-dollar business. Are there real predators involved in this? Yes, there are, but this is also organized crime that takes place on the Ivory Coast and other places out of our country. Okay, so they'll threaten them to display that photo to all of their contacts if they don't pay. And so the result is we have a lot of young men who have committed suicide over this because they're so embarrassed about being caught in that situation. And that's a real tragedy because there's ways to get them out of this, but I go back to vulnerabilities and capabilities. If you have a teenage son and you think that they're able to extricate themselves out of a blackmail situation being perpetrated by organized crime overseas, I think you're overestimating the capability of your teenage boys. Okay, so you got to talk to them about never taking those kinds of pictures and putting them online, because odds are this is what they're getting involved in. It is a massive problem. When I was the supervisor for the FBI in Boise, I got one of these a week. One a week. In Salt Lake City, our headquarters, we had one every day. So it's huge. You got to have that. Teenage girls. How many have teenage girls at home? Okay. Just very briefly, one of the things that I think where the teenage girls are very vulnerable as they're out and about, kids experiment with things, but this is the conversation with your girls, and that is about date rape and other types of sexual assault. The statistics are pretty alarming for those types of things happening. I can't count how many of these I've investigated, but there was almost exclusively one common denominator. Anybody want to guess what that was? Alcohol. Okay? I would say well over 95% of the rapes that I investigated involved a lot of alcohol. And so for your teenage girls, as they're out and about in the world, again, that's a candid conversation that I think you need to have with them. Let's talk just a little bit about the drug landscape in this day and age. How many of you have heard of fentanyl? Is that a problem out here? Okay. If you've heard of it, it's probably a problem. Back in the day, meth is still kind of king in Idaho, but fentanyl is overrunning the entire country. We're at the point now where we're seeing well over 100,000 overdose deaths per year in the nation. That exceeds the number of vehicle accident deaths. Fentanyl is a synthetic opiate. The problem is that it's just a pill. You don't have to inject it. You swallow a pill. The pills are made in Mexico by the cartels, and they're shipped into the United States by the millions. We frequently see thousands of these all the time. They're made in pill mills. They're not made by Pfizer or places that have controls, and so the DEA estimates that for you and I, who don't have a tolerance for these things, If we laid out 10 pills on the counter, 6 of the 10 would be fatal. That's how bad fentanyl is. You just don't know. And so that's another conversation that I think is worth having with your kids, because a single dose could be fatal. And so fortunately, we're not seeing a ton of fentanyl in the schools, but it's in the communities. I would speculate it's in your community, and so you need to be aware of it and be careful of it. That's a little different than when you and I were young. We didn't have things out there that would potentially kill us in a single dose, but it can happen. Officer Gomez will talk about the fact that through these online apps, you can buy these types of drugs. And so that's another concern with those apps. Again, I'll let Nurse Kelly talk about this when she concludes, but how do you talk to your teenagers about this? We need to be candid with them. You need to have the right conversations, and if that's awkward for you as a parent or grandparent, we have some tools and tips to help you have those types of conversations. But these are the things that I think are most prevalent for our kids today, and if you'll just take some precautions and help your kids navigate where these dangers might be, I think you'll go a long way towards preventing some of these tragedies. And then the other presenters will help navigate that continued pathway, and then we'll answer questions for you here at the end.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all for the invite and for putting this all together. As I was leaving my wife, I was like, you're gonna drive 2.5 hours to talk for 30 minutes? And it's funny, there's always two stories. I get to drive 2.5 hours in my own truck, listen to my own podcast. I don't have to hear any Taylor Swift, because I do have a teenage daughter, and so it was glorious. So thank you for the invite out here. My name is John Condi. I'm a pediatric neurologist. Have been now for about 17 years. I'm going to kind of go over how I got here in a little bit, but something kind of came to my mind when Agent Hart was asking questions about. I heard someone say, "How do we scare our kids into this?" And another person's like, "How do we get how do we inform on what's out there?" And I don't know what I don't know, and it reminded me. I'm kind of going off script here. I do a martial arts called Krav Maga. It's this very ugly, brutal martial art. I've been doing it now for about 5 or 6 years. And when I was early on, the teacher, he said something really interesting that's kind of stuck with me, and I think it pertains to this. He said that when a potential altercation is in front of you, a threat, there's 3 ways that you can respond. You can be scared, you can be mad, or you can be cognitively clear. And he said, there's no utility in being scared. You freeze, and you're a victim waiting to happen. So if I can get you from being scared to being angry, that's something. Because if you're angry, you're gonna fight back. And he says, I really want you to get so confident that you're cognitively clear. You look at it like a chess game, and you're not worried about your opponent. You're constantly outthinking your opponent. And I see the parallels between what he told me back then and what we're facing right now. We have this threat. And a lot of people are so scared of it, they put their head in the sand. And that's not going to do any good. There's another group of people who are angry about it, and they are very loud about their anger, and their kids are sometimes on the receiving end of that anger, and they're at least doing something. But I think if we can take it to the next level, which is what I want my part to be, and that's we understand what's going on in the brains of our preteens and teens when exposed to these things, so that we can be cognitively clear and approach it in the best way possible. So there's my little pitch to Krav Maga. All right. So when I started out in medicine, the last thing I thought I was going to do was what I'm doing right here. I was a young single guy, and I loved the adrenaline of trauma. And so I became a neurocritical care intensivist, a pediatric neurocritical care intensivist. That means that when a 9-year-old came in a car accident and a brain bleed and a stroke or a gunshot wound or meningitis or something where everybody else would throw their hands up and say, this kid's too sick, they send him to me, and I loved it. It was 18, 20, 30-hour days sometimes, and it was adrenaline the whole time. So I did that for about 7 years at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and then I had 3 kids, which has been great. But you can't do that and be a good father to 3 kids. And so I said I gotta do something where I'm home more and at work less. And then this opportunity came up at St. Luke's in Boise, and I took it. So something interesting happened in those 7 years that I was away from general neurology. So I trained in general neurology, and then I was off the grid, just living in the ICUs for about 8 years. And then I came back to general neurology. I was seeing things when I came back that I'd never seen before, because they were not really neurology. I was seeing kids, 9-year-olds, 11-year-olds on 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 psychotic medications, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, antipsychotics, insomnia, benzodiazepines. And when I started this, it was few and far between that we ever saw a teenager on an antidepressant. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And then I also started to see much more of what we call functional neurology. So children who act like they have epilepsy, but they don't. Or children who act like they're paralyzed, but they don't, but they think they are. These were the anomalies when I first started. And I don't know if you've done the math in your head. You can't, because I didn't give you the years. But I kind of left the general neurology landscape in 2007. And then I came back in 2016, which is just, it was about the same time, matched almost perfectly to when everybody started to have a cell phone, a smartphone. That was the main change in the life of our kids when I was gone. And I kept seeing it and seeing it and seeing it. I've got some examples here of what I've seen. And it's left such an impact on me that here I am. I'm as introvert as you could be. The last thing I want to do is talk in front of people, but here I am. And I'm glad to be here. These are just kind of cases, a smorgasbord of cases that I've gotten. Recently I had a 17-year-old female. She came into my office, and she had a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, and she was on 4 or 5 different medications. And I looked at her history, and I said, you don't have schizophrenia. You can't have schizophrenia. You don't have any family history. You don't have any risk factors. But what I was finding out is that she was, her only hobby, her only joy was playing first game fantasy shooter video games until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then she would get up for school at 7. And that was her life, and it had been for like the last 3 or 4 years. And so I told the mom, I'm not prescribing anything until she gets a good night's sleep. I'm not going to do anything because, and we came to an agreement that she would turn off her computer at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and really focus on getting some rest. And I never heard from them again until she called to cancel her appointment and said, I'm canceling because I don't need you anymore. In the 8 months since our first appointment, we did that. She's off all her medications, and the psychiatrist says, I've never seen this before, but her schizophrenia is cured. I've never seen cured schizophrenia. I'm seeing what we call functional seizures, or seizures that are not actually epileptic seizures. And it's a real thing. It's not a faking it, but it's a real thing. When I started my training, the group that had these, what we call functional seizures, they had been exposed to some very severe emotional trauma. Greater than 90% had been sexually abused. And this was their way of sort of bringing that trauma out. And so when I started my training, it was if you had a patient who had these functional seizures, you needed to get forensics in there because the chance that they have been sexually abused is so high. We got to start looking for that. We don't do that anymore because just what they're being exposed to online at a young age is now propagating these same seizures. When you take an 11-year-old brain and you give them a screen that can show them the entire evil of the entire world in a 5-hour period, they're not ready for that. And so we're now seeing that manifested in the same way that sexual abuse manifests itself. And if that doesn't leave an imprint on the emotional toll that the online world can give to these young developing minds, then I can't think of a more powerful example than that. This last one here, which one's, is the video working? Okay, this last one here, this is, I think, the most current, and I also think the most telling. Is anybody familiar with Tourette syndrome? Okay, great. So Tourette syndrome is when it's usually very young, it starts young, 5 or 6 years old. It's almost always exclusively boys. And it's where they have these uncontrollable urges to make vocal and motor tics. And it can range from mild to severe. And the mild ones are actually quite common, the severe ones are uncommon. It's been that way for decades, probably centuries. You never see a teenage girl just one day wake up with Tourette syndrome. That would defy what Tourette syndrome is. Until a couple years ago. I had an appointment and this 16-year-old girl came in and her parents said, a week ago she was normal and now she's doing this. This isn't her, but I got this off of the internet.
This is Therese Karaoke while my tips beside the lyrics. Billionaire. I wanna be a billionaire, so freaking bad. Buy all of the things for the dad. I wanna be on the cover of 4 magazines.
Okay? Imagine you as a parent, you literally go to sleep one day, your beautiful teenage daughter is your beautiful teenage daughter, and then she comes down to breakfast the next day with these movements and these tics. And they can be, I toned it down. There are some out there that show just how explicit and how bad they can be. So I had never seen this before. And half of me was terrified and the other half was excited because, I'm weird that way, but I'm like, I'm gonna find this diagnosis and I'm gonna be famous. So I brought her into the hospital. I had no idea what it could be. I put this poor girl through spinal taps and biopsies and PET scans and MRIs. I was sure there was an infection or inflammation somewhere in her brain and I just couldn't find it. And then a couple of days later, I got another one. And then my colleagues came to me. I have 2 colleagues and they're like, I just had a 17-year-old explosive onset Tourette's in a female. And I told them my experiences and we're looking at each other like, what is going on? And we're thinking, okay, there must be something in the Idaho water. We reached out to our colleagues in Michigan and Chicago and Phoenix, and they're like, we're seeing the same thing. Within a couple months, we were getting so many referrals for explosive onset Tourette's in teenage girls that we had to hire a nurse practitioner. We had to hire someone just to help us. And it took the pediatric neurology world about 9 or 10 months to figure out what this was. Oh, I don't have it. But it turned out this has been now called TikTok Tourette's. And it has been exclusively tied to high viewing of TikTok. That these girls get on and they see these other girls become famous for having something pathologic. They're having a problem, right? And they'll see that they have 20,000 likes in a day because they're battling cancer or something, and then subconsciously they say, I want to have something wrong. This is a subconscious, this isn't that part of the brain that we don't understand. And so their brain says, I'm gonna give you Tourette's. So it's not really Tourette's. It doesn't respond to medications, it doesn't respond to everything that Tourette's responds to. It responds to psychotherapy. But this was an endemic, and It was taking up about 40% of my clinic at one point. So that's the power. This is the subconscious power of this media in our developing minds. All right, a couple of trends here. I think Kelly talked a lot about them, but talked about the social media became available on the phones in 2007, and since then, here's the antidepressant use, here's the suicidality of kids. A lot of facts all just kind of hint to the same thing. There's a problem here. Now, the naysayers will always say, well, correlation does not mean causation. So you're telling me about these things that correlate, but does it actually cause it? So I want to spend the rest of my time making the argument, yes, it does. And I'm going to do that using neuroscience, neuroanatomy, and some pretty good research. So the first thing that we need to understand is this part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex is what makes us human. It is almost exclusively human brain. You won't find it in primates, you won't find it in canines, you certainly won't find it in cats. This is where we store the ability to make executive decisions, to understand sacrifice, to have empathy, to know the risk and benefit of things, to look at something critically and analyze it and say, is it worth my time? Is it worth the risk? Is it worth whatever? This is all in the prefrontal cortex. So I've got a slide here. It's just my appreciation of the prefrontal cortex kind of talks about just how impressive it is. It is the biggest part of our brain. It takes up about 33% of our entire brain. So think about it, 33% of our brain. We have a finite amount of space in our cranium, and we have decided to take a third of that to use for this higher function to become human beings. That's why we can't swing like apes in trees, and that's why we can't run as fast as cheetahs, because we don't have the tools there, but we can think like humans, or we should be able to. And this is what it's known to do. Controlling impulses and behaviors, having empathy, focus and attention, long-term goals, insights into the consequences of our behavior. These are important things if we're going to exist together as a society and if we're going to have long-term goal satisfaction and happiness. So how does the prefrontal cortex develop? Well, it's really interesting. When you're born with about 80 billion neurons, and you will keep those neurons throughout your whole life. But when you're born, those neurons aren't talking to other neurons, so they're useless. They're just there. There's no connections, there's no synapses. The brain comes out with this very interesting way of developing where it says, I'm going to make as many synapses as I can. I don't care if they're good or bad. So that you're born with 0. By the time you're 8, you have about 4,000 trillion of these synapses. And then around this time, there's a seismic shift in the genes and the chemistry and the development of the brain where it says it's time to stop making synapses and it's time to start figuring out which ones are actually good. So the brain doesn't come together with this plan and say, okay, we're going to make these things based on what's going to benefit us as an organism in the future. It says, let's make as many as we can and we'll figure out later. And that's exactly what it does. So what you see here is that this is birth. These little blebs here are where synapses are going to form. And you see how dense it is at 2.5 years. By 16 years, it's not as dense, so that by the time you're an adult, 49, you can see it's not nearly as dense as when you were younger, because at this point, the brain has said, I'm only going to keep about 1,000 trillion of those initial 4,000 trillion synapses. So it puts a lot of effort into deciding which one of those 75% of synapses it's going to get rid of. Why am I getting rid of it? And why am I keeping the other 25%? So as you get older, what happens is that this area of the brain matures. This is where the synapses happen. And this area of the brain, which is called the white matter, that gets fatter because as you get older, there's this coating around the brain called myelin. That helps the neurons transmit more effectively and quickly. And the more myelin you have, the faster you can think and the more effective you can think. So the synapses get pruned, and the myelin gets thick, and you should turn into be this highly functioning, focused individual. And that takes about 25 years. So the prefrontal cortex doesn't even start that process of pruning until you're about 12 or 13 years old. By the time you're 18 years old, it's about halfway done. By the time you're 25 years old, you've got your adult prefrontal cortex. So one thing that I really have to suppress, my trigger is when I hear a parent of a 9-year-old come in and say, he's just not listening to me, he just doesn't get it. And he, a 9-year-old, doesn't have the ability to get these things. It's not there yet. You have to have patience and perseverance. So what happens? Okay, if you use a synapse and you use it constantly, you get what's called long-term potentiation. And basically what that means is every time those two synapses talk to each other, the receiving end, this one, it's realizing, okay, this one's giving me information. I need to strengthen the receptors on my end because I want to be more sensitive to the next time that neuron talks to me. So you get more and more of these receptors, and this one becomes more and more sensitive to whatever this one is trying to tell it. And so that over time, if you start with a synapse that looks like this, as it gets used, it becomes big and fat, and it becomes, these are micro architectural, structural things here. It becomes actually quite solid on the neuron. And so then what happens is, there's a second cell we call it the neuroglial cell. And it has the job of walking up and down the neuron, and it will look at these synapses and it will determine, okay, this one is big and fat, I'm keeping it. This one is pathetic and atrophied, I'm going to pull it off. So if you're not using it, you lose it. If you use it, you keep it. And then by keeping it, it becomes strengthened and used more and more and more. The prefrontal cortex has a part of the brain that it is in constant communication with, and it's almost an antagonist. It's almost always at odds with it, and that's called the amygdala limbic system, or the amygdaloid complex. So unlike the prefrontal cortex, which is exclusively human, the amygdala is present in all organisms. And it's very primitive, and you cannot look at a human's amygdala and say, oh, that's human, versus a shark. It's the same structure from species to species, essentially. It is old, it is strong, it has survived millennia of speciation, and it has 4 major jobs. Oh, I don't have it. Okay. The amygdala has 4 major jobs. Basically, its job is to keep the person alive and to keep the species going. So I call it the 4 F's. It feels fear, it tells you to be scared of something. It tells you to eat, so there's food. It tells you to fight, if you need to fight. And then it tells you to fornicate, so if you have the chance. That's the job of the amygdala. It says, eat when you can, fight if you have to, run away if you can, and reproduce whenever possible. And it's a necessary part of survival. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't exist as a species. Okay. It is very strong, it's very primitive. It doesn't know how to think, it doesn't know how to rationalize, it's there. And the two of them are always at odds with each other. There's some very strong connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And so here's what can happen. Your amygdala will send your prefrontal cortex a signal saying, hey, Condi, fight that guy. You got all this training, fight that guy. My prefrontal cortex will say, yeah, probably a bad idea, he seems like a nice guy, maybe he has kids, I don't want to go to jail. All this reasoning. And the amygdala will come back and try and inhibit that and say, chicken, but in a perfect world, the prefrontal cortex wins. What can happen sometimes, though, that if the amygdala gets such such an impulse, such control. And if the prefrontal cortex is tired, so that same guy who seemed pretty nice, that my amygdala said, fight that guy, now cuts me off on the road and runs me off into a ditch when I'm already late for work. And my wife yelled at me and my kids all say they hate me. All right? We got a totally different situation right now. Now my amygdala is on fire. And says, fight that guy. My prefrontal cortex was going to try and make a rebuttal, but my amygdala says, I'm in control. You got nothing to say. And that actually can happen. The amygdala, if it gets strong enough, can inhibit the prefrontal cortex. And now you're hijacked. We call this the amygdala hijack. And we've all done it, and our kids do it all the time. We get so angry, we get so scared, we get so hungry that we do things, and the next morning we wake up and we're like, what was that, right? It happens to everybody, but that is the hijack. So in adults, it's hard to control the hijack. In kids, you've got this immature yellow belt prefrontal cortex going up against this seasoned MMA fighter amygdala. It is not a fair fight. It is just clearly not a fair fight. So when you give a 9-year-old this glowing rectangle that is designed to stimulate their emotions, any one of those 4 F's that we talked about, and expect that 9-year-old to keep control, you're naive. I don't care how precocious that 9-year-old. It is not a fair fight. It's barely a fair fight when that same individual is 25. But it's not a fair fight. So letting kids self-regulate themselves on internet and video games and social media is feckless. It is not going to end well. This is just a quick functional MRI of what happens to college students when they get a single negative tweet. So they put them in the MRI, and what they see is, oh look, the amygdala is on fire. It's turning all red. And look, the prefrontal cortex is turning all blue. A single tweet is activating the amygdala, turning off the prefrontal cortex. And then they took them out of the functional MRI and says, okay, what happened? And so what they found is that the control group, which got, this is them trying to teach them a skill. So the control group, which got a neutral tweet, the more times they tried the skill, the faster they did it. But in the group that got the negative tweet, the more times they tried to learn the skill, the slower they got. Because their thinking part of the brain was hijacked by their emotional part of the brain. So if there's any schools or teachers or educators in here, what I like to say is, you got a patient in second period with their phone in their hand, and somebody on social media says they're ugly and their hair looks stupid, you might as well send them home. Because they're going to get hijacked in the second period, and it takes about 4 hours for the hijack to clear. This is not something that they can take a couple deep breaths and get back to their normal self. It'll take about 4 hours before they are back in control. So a second period bad social media quote is going to take them all the way through the afternoon. All right, long-term. Long-term studies on excessive social media, video gaming, any kind of digital media shows that this potentiation thing has its consequences. People who let themselves use digital media for long periods of time over long periods, their brain remodels in a way that shows they are losing the prefrontal cortex and the white matter for higher executive thinking things, and they're reinforcing that they're more emotionally driven. This is just one study. This is another one that shows the prefrontal cortex white matter decreases. You get over pruning of the white matter the more you use digital media. Okay. There's a new study out called the ABC study. If I had more time, and I'm running out of time, but I would definitely kind of stick around so I can talk about it. But it is by far the most powerful, convincing study that's out there, and it's ongoing. It has over 12,000 enrollments, and it's something that's following kids for about 10 years. Well, they're starting to put out results. And one paper that was just published asked the question is total screen time associated with increased rule breaking? What does more video game playing increase social withdrawal and depression? And then they wanted to look at what it does to the brain. And what they found out by looking at this is that as they're following these kids, there's a part of the brain called the salience network that they're able to use. How active is that salience network? Does it change to predict depression and schizophrenia later on in life? And this particular study found that digital media, this is the salience network right here, social media specifically is associated with changes in that salience network that look like the same changes that are going to predict that that person is going to become schizophrenic or severely depressed later in life. So this was done on 11 and 12-year-olds who are using about 30 to 60 minutes of digital media a day. This study is going to continue, and it's now following those 11 and 12-year-olds into 14 and 15, is that half an hour a day, I'm sure, is 2 or 3 hours a day. But what this points to is that early use of these digital entertainment things is rewiring their brain, is making the long-term potentiation set up in a way that they're at risk when they get older for severe depression and schizophrenia-like symptoms. That is what I've been seeing in my office. That is what that is what neuroscience says should happen. And now we're seeing these studies that are saying that is exactly what's happening. So correlation and causation in this case are the same. Yeah, I think this is my conclusion slide. I just said that. I'm doing this because somebody said I want my daughter to not be the only daughter that does this. That's the way I got started. I have 2 daughters and a son. And I'm like, okay, if I can get a critical mass of people in our neighborhood so that they're not the ones that are weird because they actually play sports in real life and not on the video game, then I've succeeded. And it's just taken off. But I'm doing this because as a neuroscientist, as a neurologist, it is clear to me that it makes not only perfect sense, the rewiring and the long-term consequences that using digital media as babysitters and teachers can do. I'm seeing it now. And it's a spiral, and once that spiral gets going, it is so hard to come out of. And so I really hope that recognizing this early and avoiding the spiral completely is something that comes out of these things, because it is certainly easier to avoid it than come out of it once it starts. So I'll be happy to stick around for questions. My time is up. Kelly is telling me I'm way overdue. So I would like to turn the microphone over to Officer Gomez, who we always save him for the last because he is by far the most entertaining and wakes you up after my lecture. So I hope to be able to talk to some of you, and here is Officer Gomez.
All right, thanks for coming tonight. Glad you guys are all here. Wish this was packed standing room only, but this is an awesome show. Trust me on that. I'm Officer Gomez. I have worked for the Meridian Police Department for 10 years, and now I'm a Boise County Sheriff, where I'm currently a school resource officer. I want to tell you a little bit about my school resource officer life. In 2011, I became the school resource officer at Lewis and Clark Middle School. That is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, 1,200 kids. My job there was to build relationships and keep kids safe. When I got there and I started that job and I started talking to kids, what I found is that a lot of the problems we were happening at the middle school were happening online first. Drugs, bullying, suicidalities, fights. All kinds of problems were coming from social media to the school. Now, my social media was pretty non-existent at the time. My computer skills were strong. I used to be an engineer at Micron. In order to educate myself to the level of the 6th graders, I came up with genius idea number 1. I made a fake social media account of a kid at my own school. There's 1,200 of them. They don't know each other, all of them. So it took me about 15 minutes. I picked an East Coast middle school kid with a motorcycle helmet on that you couldn't identify. I made a fake social media account. I said, I hate homework, I hate school, I hate everything, and I was a teenager just like that. I friended 10 of the most popular kids at my own school. They all accepted me within about 2 hours. Not one of them asked me who I was. I was kind of sad because I had a good story, but nobody asked me. Once I had 10 of the popular kids, I never had to add anybody else. Because all I did was share, like, and spell cool with a K. And then people started adding me. Within about 3 months, more than 500 kids had added my fake account to their friends at my own school. Once I had 500 kids at my own school, who, by the way, not one of them asked me who I was. Once I had 500 friends, I could tell who was dating who. I knew who was bringing what kind of drugs and when they were bringing them. I knew who was going to fight the next day. I could find runaways better than anybody else because I had this awesome resource. So I started learning about kids, and I started sharing it with parents. But I also did a little math. Whenever Meridian Police or Boise Police would arrest a violent sex offender, I would type their name into my fake social media account, and I always came up with friends in common, which was kind of a scary thing. It's like, hey, why are these kids friending violent sex predators? And I would ask the kids at my school, hey, we just arrested this guy last night for something violent involving sex, and I see you're friends with them on social media. Oh, I just add people because, the more people you have, the more popular you are. And that was happening over and over and over again. So then what I did is I started teaching classes at the school. Hey, let's teach you about social media. And I'd go into a classroom, and in order to kind of give them shock and awe, I'd say, raise your hand if you have social media. Before they got their hands up, I'd say, put your hands down. I already know who has social media because y'all are my friends on my fake account. And of course the kids were like, oh, Gomez, I feel like you're creeping on me. I'm going to delete you. Well, delete me now. Get your phones out. And so they'd get their phones out, and they'd look at their phones, look at me. Gomez, which one of my 800 friends are you? I'm not saying delete everybody you don't know, and you'll have deleted me. Some of the kids in middle school had more than 4,000 or 5,000 friends. Right? There's no reason for that. And that's still the same today, probably even more now. This was back 10 years ago. So I started educating the kids. And of course they tried to delete me. Some of the kids would delete their accounts altogether and only add people they knew. Some of the kids thought they could tell a fake account. They couldn't. Some of the kids whittled their friends down, and some of the kids didn't care. Anyways, the education started getting out. And I know this because a year later, in order to test the kids, I made a second account of a fake 13-year-old girl. I made it super clean and painfully obvious she was 13. It was her birthday like every 3 weeks. Yay, I'm 13, I can have a real social media account. I started friending my kids, again at my same school. And this time what I noticed is not all the kids were accepting me. It's like they worked hard to get rid of me the first time. It's like, we're not accepting anybody we don't know the second time, because that was a lot of work. It took me probably 3 or 4 months to get about 30 or 40 friends, which was way better than 500 friends without asking. I had to work for the 30 or 40 friends. And then social media threatened to shut down my account because the kids had reported me as not being a real person, and beautiful. So what I did, I let the account sit for a minute, and then I opened it up to friends of friends. I said, hey, let's see what happens if I open it up to friends of friends, because up till then I only accepted Lewis and Clark kids. When I opened it up to friends of friends, I started getting 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old men started friending my account, which I accepted them. Let's see what these guys are about. I will say that a big majority of those guys were what we call a ghost follower. They would friend my 13-year-old girl, never say anything, never like anything, never message me. Fine. But they weren't all like that. Week number 2 of having opened up to friends of friends, a 26-year-old man friended me. He says, hey. I said, hey, back. And he says, hey, look, I'm a 26-year-old Marine sniper. I'm stationed in Afghanistan. I'm a sniper up on rooftops in order to stay awake during the day and alert. I talk to people on a satellite phone through social media. You look like a fun person to talk to. I'm like, okay, let's talk. So we talked for about 15 minutes about his job and everything. At about the 15-minute mark, without any kind of warning or anything, he says, hey, send me nudes. That's inappropriate pictures for you old people that don't know what that means. I said, rude. I can't believe he's asking a 13-year-old girl for inappropriate pictures. Of course, all my police buddies are like, send it. I'm like, no. So I told him, look, I'm 13. It's not what I do. It's illegal. Not what I'm interested in. So we leave the conversation, I think, okay, we're done. The next morning, I have another message from him. He says, hey, do you really live in Meridian, Idaho? I'm like, yep, I'm 13, I go to Lewis and Clark Middle School. He says, hey, because you've been such a good friend, here we've known each other 12 hours. He says, I would like to take you out on a nice dinner date to say thank you. I come back next week for a week of leave, since I've been in Afghanistan for 6 months, and I really want to thank you for your friendship. I'm like, wow. He sent me a nice picture of the dinner menu, the dinner jacket, the nice car he was going to pick me up in. So I called my boss, my sergeant, I'm like, hey, this is what I got going on. And my sergeant says, well, what do you have on your calendar? Nothing. Okay, we're going on a date. So we agreed to meet a week later at the park right next to our school. We picked after dark because then nobody's supposed to be in the park and we limit the bystanders. In that week, he started what we call the grooming process. So, hey, when we meet, can I give you a hug? Sure. When we meet, will you wear this? Hey, when we meet, can I give you a kiss on the cheek? Sure. By the time the end of the week came, things had gotten very graphically sexual on what this 26-year-old wanted to do with a 13-year-old. I probably told him 52 times by then that I was 13. Well, date night came. All the bets were in from our department, everybody else's department. Is this guy really going to show up? Because fantasy is one thing and reality is a whole other thing. So at our agreed upon meeting time, we had undercover guys at the park. They actually told me a half hour ahead of time. They said, hey, your guy is here already. I'm like, oh. So I just rolled up in my patrol car. Hey, I'm Officer Gomez. You're under arrest for felony enticing children over the internet. I arrested him. What I found out, what I actually knew a little bit ahead of time, is that this guy actually was never in the military. He was a homeless guy who was just using a story to meet girls. And what I did is I did a search warrant on his accounts, and what I found, he was getting vouchers to go from the homeless shelter to the Meridian Public Library or the Boise Public Library, using their free computers to friend middle school girls only, not even high school girls, they were too old. And he would just say, hey, 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 right down the line. Anybody that said hey back, he would copy and paste the exact same paragraphs that he sent to me. Exactly the same. When I got the data back from the social media company, on my search warrant, which was only a small time span, over 100 middle school girls had sent them inappropriate pictures. Over 100 to a homeless guy. 4 had met him for dates that I could identify. This was a crazy story that hit the news. So then the mayor and the chief said, hey, is there a problem here in Idaho? Or is this just a one-off thing that you happen to find? So that summer, myself and another SRO, we made a bunch of fake accounts and just parked them. 13-year-old boys and girls, let's see what happens. We ended up arresting in a 10-month period 14 men that came to Meridian, Idaho thinking they were going to meet up with 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds. In reality, we could have met 15 guys every single day, but we just don't have the resources for that. 15 guys a day, easy. The second guy that came to meet us was a local Boise college coach. 50 years old, and this guy was not a pretty guy. He was like a no neck missing link kind of looking guy. Each person we arrested, all their friends and family said they had no idea. But each person we arrested also had other things they had going on. So every time I arrested somebody, I had to contact other agencies. Hey, look, I need you to go talk to this kid. I think they're a victim of this. Hey, I think I need you to go talk to this kid. They're a victim of this. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And through arresting those, since then I've arrested a bunch more. Without even hunting them, they come to me. That's how bad it is. The last guy I arrested was a 30-year-old guy who bought a $69 plane ticket from San Diego to Boise Airport and was walking to Idaho City to meet a 13-year-old girl. That's how crazy that is. And through all that, I've developed an education course, which is what I'm kind of giving you the compressed version tonight. And you guys can follow me on Facebook for more stuff. Some of it's scary. The rest of it's also scary. But the information is there for you to consume. So a couple things I want to talk to everybody about. You guys brought up the topic of inappropriate pictures. Let's talk about nude photos in minors. If you're under the age of 18 in Idaho and you send out an inappropriate picture of any kind, it's a misdemeanor charge the first time, it's a felony the second time. whether you send it to friend or stranger. If you're in possession of a photo of somebody under the age of 18 and you get caught with it, first time's a misdemeanor, second time's a felony. Unless they're 3 years or more younger than you, then it's a felony right away. If you threaten somebody to share their picture, whether you have it or not, it's a felony right away. And the latest popular thing is making AI naked photos of your friends and sending them around. That's an arrestable offense, felony right away. And I tell all my SROs, if somebody does that, that you can ruin somebody's life. But we're not talking to kids enough about that. And there's so many apps. You can just snap a picture of your friend. It's called a Nudify app. You snap a picture of your friend and it makes a nude photo of them and everybody thinks it's funny. The problem is, as soon as you send that, it's gone. It's not coming back. And now you've ruined somebody's life. Right? So these are serious conversations we have to have with kids. Now, the naked picture thing is an epidemic. By my numbers, and I probably have better numbers than anybody else, by 11th grade, about 80% of kids have sent out nudes. By 8th grade, it's almost 50%. That should concern everybody. Right? Because the next thing I'm going to talk to is a few of the apps that the kids are wanting to use. The biggest app that every kid is going to want is Snapchat. So let's talk about Snapchat for a second. Snapchat is probably 5th grade on up. Every kid is going to beg for it every single day. Right? And if you're a parent, that is like the bane of your existence. No, you can't have it. No, you can't have it. Well, but this person has it. Well, call them, see if you go live with them. Not in my house. Right? So Snapchat is super secret. It deletes chats. Now, are chats ever really deleted? Kind of. Bad guys are going to take pictures of the picture so they can keep the chats. Snapchat is actually going to delete the chats because they don't want the police to get them. So Snapchat is actually helping the predators. So, the way this looks, if I get a report of a 13-year-old getting sextortion by somebody in Pennsylvania, I send Snapchat a subpoena that says, I need these chats because there's a crime. Snapchat says, we don't have those chats, so we're not sending them to you. So unless the victim got their own evidence, I have zero evidence. So I kind of tease parents. I say, hey, look, 5 out of 5 sex predators recommend Snapchat for kids. Unfortunately, most parents agree. Snapchat also has a 24-hour timeline. This is where all the drugs are sold. You can see what drugs are available, you can see when they posted them for sale, and you can have them delivered. Snapchat has live mapping. Okay, this live mapping is one of the most dangerous things that an app can have, is the live mapping. And Instagram just added the same feature a couple months ago. But let me tell you why it's so bad. Let's say your kid sends out an inappropriate picture. It's going to get shared sooner or later. As soon as that gets shared, a creeper is going to get it eventually. They're going to add your kid on Snapchat. As soon as they add your kid on Snapchat, because they accept people they don't know, because of that live mapping feature, now this creeper knows where your kid goes to school. They know their class schedule. They know where they live. They know what bedroom they sleep in. They know what bathroom they use. They know what after-school sports they play. They know where they work. They can find out what their car is. All from adding them on one application. What that looks on later on in life is, at my middle school game, I've arrested 2 different registered sex offenders who had inappropriate pictures of volleyball girls in middle school and came to watch them. I've arrested people across from somebody's house because they can see their map and they're looking in their bedroom. That's a dangerous, dangerous thing to have, is that live mapping. Now parents are, oh, I shut it off, or I told my kid to shut it off. Your kid is going to get bullied to put it back on. Right? They want to go to the mall and they want to see what other friends they have when they're at the mall. They want to see what other friends are going to be at the football game on Friday night. These are things we have to watch out for. Snapchat also has My Eyes Only, which is a secret hidden folder. If you don't have the PIN code to that folder, you cannot get into it. I, as a police officer, cannot get into it. And unfortunately, what happens is, when you learn about this secret folder and you look at your kid's phone and say, hey, what's your PIN code? They're going to say, I forgot. I set it up so long ago, I don't have it. And as any good parent's going to do, you're going to snatch up their phone and say, hey, when you give me the PIN code, you can have it back. Your kid is going to log into Snapchat on their school-issued Chromebook, which they can, and they're going to delete all the pictures they don't want you to see, and about 2 hours later, they're going to come out and say, hey, Mom, I found my PIN code. It was written on my binder. Here, you can have it. And Mom's going to look, oh, horses and rainbows. I can't believe I didn't trust you. And that's how that conversation goes in thousands of houses across the United States. But that My Phone Only folder holds a lot of secrets. And you might save your kid's life or somebody else's life by checking in on that and making sure you know what's in there. Shouldn't be anything. Now, if that wasn't enough, here's a couple other things Snapchat has. They have an AI buddy, artificial intelligence. So every person that has Snapchat gets an AI buddy, whether you want them or not. Kids can dress them, they can name them, they can gender them, they can do whatever they want. Kids are using this as their homework buddy, their dating helper, their boyfriend, girlfriend, their psychologist, their everything. This isn't real. AI is super powerful, and we're unleashing it on millions of kids around the United States without any kind of research whatsoever. And parents are like, here you go. Now, the last thing Snapchat has to addict kids even further is streaks. If you take a picture and send it to your friend and they send you one back within 24 hours, that's a one streak. Now, kids pride themselves on having streaks. A lot of the kids have streaks of, over 1,000, 2,000. That means 2,000 days in a row you've been sending pictures back and forth. If you miss a 24-hour period, you go back to 0. Now that translates into when I arrest people. 10 years ago when I would arrest people, their biggest request was, hey, can I have a smoke on the way to jail? It's like, no. Now their biggest request is, I don't want to lose my streaks, Gomez. Can you give my bestie my username and password so I don't lose my streaks? They're going to jail, and this is what they're worried about. Okay, you got to know that this is what's happening. Instagram has the same mapping picture now as of a couple months ago. So people can see where your kid is down to within 10 feet of where they're at. TikTok right now is probably the granddaddy of sexual grooming of kids. TikTok, which used to be called Musical.ly, has challenges. All the things have challenges. But TikTok is the worst. The very first challenge TikTok has was called the plank challenge. You would face the camera in push-up position. The camera's on the floor looking at you. And when the music starts, you would go from push-up to plank to push-up to plank to the beat of the music. Now, if you sent that to your friends, you'd get 10, 20 likes, oh, good job, and they would try and do the same thing. What young girls learned very quickly is that if they wore a loose-fitting shirt, that camera's looking right down their shirt. Now we go from, instead of 20 likes, we're getting 20,000 likes. We're getting 500,000 likes. Basically, this is worldwide grooming kids to be worth their body parts. Okay, and I always ask parents, what are your kids worth? Are they worth their body parts? How do they know? Do you guys talk about it? Is it printed out in your house somewhere? Right? These are important questions, because if they're going to spend 5-10 hours a day on TikTok, guess what? They're going to be sexualized. Those 500,000 people that are liking a 12-year-old with a loose-fitting shirt, they should be telling her, hey, look, have some modesty. Go to church, get some other things to do. Don't be showing your body at 12, at 13, at 14. Instead, these adult men from around the world are asking if they can see more. And they are teaching these young people to be worth their body parts. Now, if you're a boy and you want to get famous on TikTok, it's usually violence. You got to hit your friend on the head with a shovel. Steal a car, right? That's a big one in the last couple of years. The Kia boys, they would steal Kia cars. Damage the bathroom at your school. All these things are no good. Sexualization, making drugs popular. These are things that you parents control. Right? So the question is, I don't want my kid to miss out. And your kid will be missing out. If they don't have a phone, they're going to be missing out on all the drama that happens at school. They're going to be missing out on sexualization. They're going to be missing out on all the bad things that happen with cell phones. Right? But you're going to let them be a kid again. And when I see kids in 6th grade. Without phones, they bring their ukulele, they bring their drawing, their sports, their dirt bikes, their horseback riding, their photography, their dancing. As soon as they get that phone, all that goes away. Addiction, giving up everything for one thing. And I see these being as big addiction as any drug. And parents, unfortunately, use it as a babysitter. Right? But you have a chance to change. Families are awesome. I love having conversations with kids. I love going outdoors. I love going hiking. I love going camping. Human connection is one of the greatest things you can do with your family. Don't let your phone be the thing that stands between you and human connection, which is one of the most important things your kids will ever know. Now, the last thing I want to tell you guys about, because I know this has been awesome. So I always go on patrol in the summer. And when I go on patrol in the summer, the biggest call I always go to is domestic fights. And these domestic fights are always the same, right? And when I get there, Mr. and Mrs. such and such are choking each other out on the front yard. As soon as I get out of my patrol car, they go from choking each other out to screaming at me. So what did I do? And what they start screaming at me is, "Officer, I married the devil. My husband is the most useless this, that, and the other. My wife is the most useless that, and the other." After going through these 1,000 times, what I learned very quickly is, I have a math formula, because they're all the same. And so I'll take the angriest of the twos. Hey, come talk to me. Okay, 2s don't marry 10s and 10s don't marry 2s. Where are we at? If they tell me they married a 2, guess what? I'm going to tell them they're a 2 as well. And then when I share with the kids, I said, look, I married a 10. It doesn't make my life perfect. But when I have problems, I'm going to work hard at keeping my 10 because they're not easy to replace. If I'd have married a 2, guess what? I'll go to Walmart and maybe get lucky and get a 3 tomorrow. In middle school and high school, I tell all the kids they're 5s. And then I tell them, how do we go from a 5 to a 2? Drugs, alcohol, tobacco get you down to a 2 very quickly. Show up to class late. Don't do your homework. Don't participate in this awesome life. Be disrespectful. It's all going to get you to a 2 very easy. And there's going to be lots of other 2s with you. How do you get from a 5 to a 10? It's not that hard. Anything to better yourself. Singing, dancing, sports, music, guitar, travel, saving money, service of other people, family time, games, languages. The options are limitless, and you can improve yourself for the rest of your life. Where do you think this gets you? Plus or minus? I ask kids all the time in high school, it's like, hey, when you get married, do you want your spouse to spend the same amount of time as you on social media? They're like, no, somebody's got to do something. Okay? Thank you all for coming. I'm Officer Gomez. If you look me up on Facebook, I'm almost famous. It's like Trump, Obama, Gomez. Okay, you'll find me pretty quickly. I put lots of tips. I'm not that far from here. Thanks for coming tonight, and we're going to put it over to Nurse Kelly to finish up, and then we'll take some questions.
Okay, do you guys see why I put these guys together? So good. Okay. Do you know there's a job that's called happiness researcher, both at Harvard and Yale? The Yale happiness researchers found that we as humans are really bad at choosing things that make us really happy. So for instance, a lot of the times we rely on the likes and the friends on social media, you know, to make us feel good, but that really is not what makes us happy. And then Harvard, their researchers did a long study, I think it was about 80 years, and they found out that the number one source of happiness is by the quality of your relationships. And so this is the ending our plan of how to help your kids to have good relationships and good mental health and good physical health. Some of these things you're gonna be like, yeah, probably all of them. It makes sense. It makes sense in all of our lives to do these. The number one thing that we recommend is that you have family dinners with your kids as often as possible. Now this allows you to connect with them, talk about their days, talk about their friends, and just find out what's going on in their lives. It allows you to put down your phones and have them put down their devices and just be together. And it can be short time, it's up to you, but this gives you extra connection. And it's reported that teenage anxiety goes down proportionally with how many family dinners they have. Something that we have for you, I don't have them printed, but you can go to our website, which is, I'll give it to you again, but it's committingto16.org, and you can get some of these family dinner conversation pages and print them out. It's not pretty, I made it myself, like the website, but you'll be able to get it. And then you can go down this list, you can talk to your kids about any of these things if you don't know what to talk about, and they're great prompts. And then the family values. So like Officer Gomez said, you can talk about your own family values so that everybody's on the same page. And then the next thing, encourage healthy eating. Good nutrition matters for our physical and mental health. It supports brain wellness, it increases mood and emotional stability, and reduces depression risk. So like this, food is not just fuel, it's information for the brain. Something that we do at our house too is, it's not really science-backed, but we pick a team and we support that team together. So our team is the Green Bay Packers. They didn't have the best year this year, but we like to dress up in the swag that Santa brought us one year and watch our games together and eat brats and pretzel bread and just enjoy that time together. So I encourage you guys to pick something like that. Pick a team. And then next, prioritize sleep. That is so important in the neurological portion of this. And it helps them to regulate mood, reduce stress, improve cognitive function, boost resilience, enhance well-being, increase mental clarity. And then it's recommended to have either 9 to 11 for 6 to 13-year-olds, 9 to 11 hours, and then 14 to 17-year-olds, 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. And I know that's hard with early school and stuff, so it's, as much as you can make that a priority, it's going to help you. Exercise. Exercise gives us endorphins, boosts our mental and physical health, supports weight, healthy weight, reduces anxiety and depression. And our goal is 60 minutes a day, especially when it's warmer. Spend time outside, kind of goes with that. Is being in the sun just gives you that vitamin D, that extra boost of energy. And another thing that we like to do is service. Service is something that's going to connect you to others and help your kids learn empathy and develop social and relationship skills, build self-confidence. And there are lots of options. These are some that we had at our school, so I put them up there. But like the Just Serve Club or the Key Club are helpful, and you might have some, like the FFA might do a lot of service. And then youth groups at church, you could do family things together. Anyway, lots of ideas. So serve together. And then finally, screen time limits. So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends less than 2 hours per day, and you've heard all the reasons why. The last thing is to get your kids buy-in with their health, including their mental health. And if you go here, you can go to our website, and I'll have it again and again. But my daughter and I started this nonprofit called Committing to 16, and that's actually what started this whole event, where she got on, we put a video of her teaching kids in a 7-minute video, like why wait till 16 to have social media? And so we're just trying to empower that in them. And on our website, we have some parent resources. So like other videos that you can watch or websites that you can go to for help. And then a list of devices that are going to help you communicate with your kids, but it's not a smartphone. So it could be the watches or the safe phones like Pinwheel, Gab, Trumi, etc. There's a list there, and there might be some codes that are discount codes if you want to look through those. So, and then also outside there are the information tables. If you didn't get a book for your household, we have The Anxious Generation that we're giving away. And then we have some Narcan, which is the antidote for the opiate overdose. You can grab some of that if you'd like and just talk to them out there about it. So finally, you guys, we don't expect anyone to be perfect. We're not perfect, but we do like progress, and that's what we hope for you. And now we're gonna have any question and answers, and I'll have these guys come back up. So, do you guys have any questions? And for whom? Okay, back in the back, and then we'll, yeah.
So you guys talked about like TikTok and the TikTok Tourette's. Is YouTube kind of the same thing, like with the YouTube Shorts?
Yes, so I was asked, is YouTube like TikTok is as far as what it does to the wiring of the brain? So let me, the short answer is yes. Let me kind of go back and emphasize something that, as I'm sitting there critiquing myself, I'm like, I didn't emphasize this. We talked about what causes that long-term potentiation, what causes the brain to say, I'm going to keep this synapse, and that's use. So at the heart of these rewiring issues of digital media, it's that they're taking these synapses and they're hitting it with repetitive, constant, highly emotional signals, which is going to cause that long-term potentiation to happen and then reinforce itself. So these YouTube shorts are meant to do exactly what it says in the name, be very short. Because that's about how long it takes to get that dopamine reward signal to say potentiate, and then they want to move on and get it again and get it again and get it again until that particular circuit is so reinforced that you can't get rid of it. The litmus test that I tell my families in my clinic is, if the platform you're on is monetizing your child's time, get rid of it. Because as soon as that big dollar comes in, any care that they have for the well-being of your child is lost. So YouTube Shorts makes money the longer they're on it. Facebook's make money the longer they're on it. Video games, they get money recruiting people and they buy stuff, and they make more, the more you do it, the more money they get. And so that should be a big red flag to the long-term development is this company monetizing my child's time? And if the answer is yes, it's going to be detrimental to their synaptic potentiation and pruning process. Does that help?
It does, yeah. Thank you. Another question right there, yeah.
So I'm not on social media a lot. Is there a way to turn off the live mapping in Instagram?
There is a way to turn off the live mapping on Instagram and Snapchat. The problem is the kids will get bullied and encouraged and enticed to turn it back on. Like I said, especially they got boyfriend and girlfriend, they want, hey, I need to see where you're at. If they're going to the mall, if they're going to any kind of event, they want to see everybody who's there. So a lot of times they'll turn it back on, or sometimes the application will do an update and turn it back on for you, whether you like it or not. But there is a way to turn it off. It's not too hard, but the kids like to turn it back on for their own purposes, which is why they built it in there.
Kind of would seem like a separate issue with kids with autism or have severe autistic behaviors, that the screen time is kind of the only way parents can get them to cooperate, or to be calm, or to be in the car. Have you dealt with that very much? And what are your recommendations in that population that's different than kind of an exception, but still is kind
That is a great question, because autism is such a spectrum now, right? So it's really hard to give a definitive answer on something that encompasses everything from just maybe a highly intelligent introvert to somebody who is truly autistic. Now, in the very severe autistic children who lack the neurobiology to have insight and empathy and things, and that's truly all they have, then it can be a godsend to that particular patient population. But because it's such a spectrum, what we find is that those more in the mild to moderate, who are probably the ones that would benefit most from not having this at all, because it will force their brain to reach out and make those synapses that will make them more successful, more functioning as they get older. Those are the ones who are being given it because it's so easy. So we actually find this, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I can't remember the word. We find this paradox where the population that is most sensitive to having the long-term effects from it is the population that's being given it the most, because that's what they're drawn to the most. So again, the extreme, truly autistic kids, nonverbal, unable to make those ones, I fully think that they're getting something out of life with it, but be wary of the spectrum, that if the potential is there to learn these things with the right kind of counseling direction, giving them this technology is the worst thing you can do for them.
What are the most effective tactics to get out of hijack that you see? What do you recommend?
If it's a problem, cognitive behavioral therapy. Are you familiar with that? Cognitive behavioral therapy is a type of therapy that's actually based on the teachings of the Roman Stoics, which like Marcus Aurelius and for those who've seen Gladiator. And it's basically teaching, it's a course that you teach yourself how to recognize early on when your mind and body are doing things that you don't want to, and you take back control. Once the hijack happens, it's happened, right? And really, truly the best thing to do to get them out of the hijack is to put them in a low sensory environment and get rid of anything that might propagate or potentiate that hijack. So if my son gets hijacked because my sister, or because his sister, my other daughter, put him there, they've got to be separated, right? Even her trying to say, I'm sorry, I apologize, is just making him more mad. So you get them out of the environment to hijack them, and you just give them time. As they get older, and take the cognitive ability to do this doesn't even start to kick until like 12 or 13 years. They can start to learn, if they're motivated, the early signs of, I'm about ready to get hijacked. And at that point, it's deep breathing, removal of the stimulus, refocusing on something that is going to take them away from it. But yeah, once it's happened, it's happened. Yeah. So that's a great question, and I'm smiling because the last patient I saw today, before I hopped in my truck and came here, the question is, what can you do to reverse the damage of long-term rewiring that's happened? And literally the last patient that I saw, and I jumped in my car, or my truck and came here, she succeeded in doing that. So basically, you have to be a motivated family because you have to get rid of the stimulus. So I recommend a 1 month fast. If it's to the point where dysfunction has occurred and it's really causing a problem, I recommend a 1 month fast. No limiting, no screening, you just get rid of it. Absolutely get rid of it. Lock it up. No. Sometimes it has to be in the summertime because schools won't let them take a fast from computers during the school year, but you find a month where there is no TV, there's no video games, no digital media, nothing. And then they're going to withdraw. The first 2 weeks are going to be miserable for the family as much as for the child. They're going to yell and they're going to fight and they're going to curse and they're going to punch holes in the wall and they're going to say, I hate you, and they're not going to sleep, and it's going to be terrible. By week 3, things start to calm down. By week 4, they start to see this is what it's like to be happy. And then if they get to that point, it's a responsible, okay, we know that this is part of life, so let's reintroduce it, but with these limits. If you try and do those limits early on, it's just not going to do anything. So I haven't found anything more effective than just ripping off the Band-Aid and saying this next month is going to suck, but it's something that we're going to do out of love. And then replace it with things that are going to rewire the brain in order to show them, true accomplishment. If they're playing a sport, they need to focus on that sport. If they're not playing a sport, get them into a sport. Get them into music, get them into debate, something else to take up that time and start those cognitive synapses to form. There was another hand over here.
Thank you for everything. You guys are awesome. You brought up the best at the end there. This is a collective action problem, as discussed in the book that you're handing out. So the phrase "commit to 16" is your attempt to address the collective action problem. As a collective, let's address that. So thank you for providing that resource.
Thank you.
What other resources are there out there for this collective action problem, which is the scariest of everything that you talk about, that we're accepting the loss of humanity because a phone-based childhood is not a human childhood. What other resources are there out there?
Yeah.
Not Australia, not going to ban use of phones until 16 in America. So we need to organize and solve this collection action problem.
Yes. So what other resources are there? I follow a few. I look at Instagram sometimes, and there's one called 1,000 Hours Outside. And there's another one called Protect Young Eyes. And another one called Wait Until 8th. They're all posting really good things. Who else do you know?
I don't think I have. Some of those things are great. The community is what does the best, right? You get a community together. Hey, we're going to have Friday night game night. We're going to have Saturday, service day. We're going to go down to the soup kitchen and help. We're going to pick up trash. The community is the best helper you're going to have, especially if you can get groups going in your same community, right? Hey, we're going to all pledge this. We're going to all keep this away, because it's hard to say no to your kid when they're the only one that doesn't have a phone. Right, so if you have a small group here, at least you got 10 kids, right? At least you have something to help you so that your kid doesn't feel like they're the only one. And I get parents who say, my kid is telling me, Officer Gomez, they're the only one in 5th grade without Snapchat. I'm like, no, your kid's lying. They have Snapchat, they're just not telling you. Right, so the community environment is going to be the best, especially your local community.
And you guys, this is actually a great turnout, and a lot of you're all in the same community, right? So we use each other and make some goals together. If you have a friend here, do it. Up there.
Okay. Before we move on, there is a really cool community resource with Goody Motor. I don't know if you know about this, but you can sign a pledge. You go to Goody Motor just here in town, sign a pledge. If your child is in 7th grade and they pledge not to have social media up until their senior year of high school, they will give them a $1,600 scholarship their senior year. And if they register after that, like as a freshman, then they can continue the pledge up until their senior year, and they will give them a $1,000 scholarship. I don't know, like they're kind of concerned, Goody Motor, is that more people don't know about it. And they recently moved the target date back to junior high because they as they were recruiting at high schools, they were like, oh, the kids already have phones, it's kind of too late. And so now they're kind of focused on that middle school population. But that's available right here in our community, and I wish more people knew.
Yeah, are there any kids here that are 7th grade or younger? Hey, do you guys want $1,600? Are you willing to wait until you're a senior in high school to get social media? Go do it, guys. Okay, thank you. What was that called again?
It's, I forget what the pledge is called. You just can go into Goody Motor just here in town, and you'll register online, and they'll check in with you. So you set up an account, and they'll check in with you, and you respond whether you're keeping that commitment or not. I think they check in maybe every 3 to 6 months. I just signed my kids up, so we're kind of learning.
Okay.
But it's there, it's real.
Can they come and talk to you for more info?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't. Okay. Yeah. There's like one more question. We have 1 minute till 8.
Okay, I have a 17-year-old who is dying to have a Snapchat. What age should you recommend for that?
Never? 18, I recommend, well, with what I'm doing with my daughters, I have a 16-year-old right now, and she's committing to wait till 18 to get anything. So, never is best, but the older that you can be, the more your brain will develop. You know, for all of you. And here's Gomez.
How is your sister? I'll tell you.
There's never been a more perfect time to look at social media and see a bunch of adults that shouldn't be on it. Right? You can look at any kind of social media right now and you see adults, you can see the tick across the, politics, right? Minnesota, aliens coming in. They're so angry that you know they're not enjoying their life. So what age is a good age? For some people, social media is never a good time. And even myself, right, if I spend more than 2 hours a day on social, I've wasted my life today. And when somebody says, I don't have Facebook, should I get it to follow you? No, absolutely not. Don't let me be the reason you started social media. Please.
Okay, thank you. And the last question was, how's my sister doing? And what he just said is still kind of her problem. She's not well. She's 25 now, and she's having a really hard time. She had to move back in with my parents a couple weeks ago. And, you know, it's hard. It's a fight for her every day. So whether or not she would have had mental health problems without social media in middle school, I don't know. But she's not doing well. So if I can help any of you kids avoid that, I will, and that's why we're here. Thank you so much, you guys.